Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby. Alphalist is a closed community with over 400 CTOs who share their knowledge and experience in a Slack space and at events. With this podcast, we want to give our members and interested parties insights into the thoughts and ideas of top CTOs. If you're interested in becoming a member of the community, please visit alphalist.com to find out more on how to apply. This episode is kindly sponsored by Okta Customer Identity Management. If you're transforming into a digital platform and are facing identity management challenges, listen closely now, because Okta offers the market-leading solution to help you make identity and access management work as a service. A platform that offers endless ways to connect with your employees and customers. Get support for your most important customer-facing initiatives. Integrate identity and access into every app and create secure and engaging experiences in no time by outsourcing workforce or customer identity management to Okta. Get started in 15 minutes and test IAM or CIAM as a service. Create frictionless registrations and login experiences for your applications and make identity the foundation for your zero trust strategy and enable access for all users regardless of their location, device, or network. Visit alphalist.com/Okta to try it out. In an upcoming episode, I talk to Zagnik Nandi, Okta CTO, about everything identity management. Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby, and today with me is Alesia Braga. She is the CTO of SmartRecruiters. SmartRecruiters is an ATS, an applicant tracking system. I hope I got it right or described it right. I think it's a unicorn. Like a lot of companies are turning into unicorns very quickly these days. I just saw statistics yesterday that is kind of crazy this year. They collected 225 million in funding. And Alesia, did I forget anything that you might want to add on that?
No, I think you got that right. And yes, market is it's extremely crazy right now. There's a lot of nice companies achieving unicorn, and we proud to join the club since the last funding round.
Okay. Maybe we start a bit earlier. So typically I look at my guests' nerd journey or nerd path. What is yours? How did you get into that?
Oh, I think it kind of started really, really early for me. I was fortunate enough to introduce in kind of STEM really, really early in my life. My mom used to teach computer science in school. And when I was 6, I kind of stayed with her after my whatever those first graders do and started basically coding first to show off. And then I started enjoying that. So obviously not production ready, but I got introduced to a computer and some Visual Basic when I was 6. And so it started.
Okay, that's easy. And then how did it evolve from Visual Basic? I mean, did you study IT or what did you do?
Yeah, I studied applied math and computer science with this kind of goal in mind that maybe computer science is not going to work purely. So I needed a bit of a AI touch. At that point, AI was a bit more, generic. There's a whole bunch of models and mathematics that, and we didn't have enough good computing power to actually execute on those. So I kind of studied AI when it wasn't cool, so to say. So that was pretty clear for me what I want to do. And I started working really early as well. So I kind of tend to be, maybe like as many engineers, I'm driven by sort of boredom or being lazy to do certain things multiple times. So I'd rather invest and build a solution that will scale and just redo the same components. And so I started experimenting when I was a student and, doing any sort of computer labs of creating a system that will test the computer lab automatically. So I don't have to redo it and test it myself. So that was kind of always a curiosity driven, but with a solution in mind that I don't have to do certain things twice. And that evolved pretty much first into kind of web development, of experimenting, building little websites, either for my school or whatever I was part of. Then I got a job in one outsourcing company, or augmented engineering, so to say. I always worked with kind of American clients or any other client in Europe, and then moved to management eventually. So that's kind of how I got there.
How was that? Like, what was the tipping point when you decided, okay, I want to go to management. I want to become a manager?
Yeah, that was interesting decision for me. So I kind of grew up in the technology of PHP. So I started coding in PHP. I quickly grew to a senior engineer. And then I felt like I got to the point I either go and learn another technology. And I tried that. So I moved a bit on Java. But then it felt kind of the same. And another direction for me was, okay, I either continue on a different technology or try leading teams. And that's what I took. And I kind of understood that I'm enjoying this and I'm good at it. And then it evolved from the team to multiple teams and so on and so forth. But it was fairly early in my career. I think I was, maybe 20. So from the time of directly coding, I had maybe 4 years experience as I started working when I was 16.
And you also worked for Google, if I got it right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I worked for Google Cloud. So in the cloud division, that was a really good opportunity to kind of go back to the roots. And it was a mix of IC role and consulting role, working with engineers, working with SRE. It was a cool journey. And I think it shaped me as a leader later on. And now how I lead and what I value. So yeah, I did that too.
Okay. And how did you stumble into SmartRecruiters? Did you originally act as a co-founder, or did you join at a certain time, or?
So I joined SmartRecruiters almost 2 years ago. I was recruited. I'm the first CTO, so no, I'm not a member of the founding team. The company is on the market for about 10 years, changed a little bit in terms of the solution. And I was recruited by a recruiter. At that time, I had a job. I was pretty happy where I was in a CTO role, but SmartRecruiters offered kind of a unique possibility to try CTPO role. So despite the fact that I have a title of a CTO also on product, and for me, that was kind of the missing component of how can you actually unlock the potential of the whole team together, controlling not only how you build, but also what and why. So that was kind of a driving factor for me.
And do you think, like, it's a bit philosophical potentially, but do you think that like all eggs in one basket for such a product is a good idea? I mean, I guess you do, because you do it every day. But like, I sometimes think that those moments of friction between CPO and CTO are sometimes good. Do you somehow have that friction in your mind maybe every once in a while, or how do you deal with that?
I guess friction is always good. It's a driving force, so to say, off of the innovation, and as long as it's respectful and you understand why. So for me, it's actually a good thing to have both together, but then you also need to have a right mindset to do this job right. Because yes, it can quickly tip towards either technology or product or whatever is more popular these days. So maybe if you think about the leaders, there are multiple types of CTOs, right? It's quite different to be a CTO of 15 developers and kind of a small startup that moves really, really fast, versus being a CTO of the company that has 600 engineers. The same here, right? So if you think about CTO plus CPO, it's just a different kind of leadership that you're required. And I try to foster this kind of bottom-up mindset from VP engineering, VP product, so they come with some sort of little argument in mind, or how can we get to the best solution? But I'm basically a tiebreaker. So there is a certain amount of conflict. So it's not very top down and authoritarian.
Yeah, I think like if the organization is big enough, it is potentially a good thing to have. But for small organizations, sometimes I feel that might be a conflict in goals every once in a while for a CPTO, right?
Yeah, I think it can go either way, right? And it's not about extremes. So if you have two leaders that are passionate about their own goals, but then an organization doesn't support them to align, or there is no kind of a synergy between those two leaders, it can become ugly quite quickly. And at the same time, there's lack of conflict, then you're probably not pushing this hard enough. And if you think about kind of any sort of methodology, either agile transformation or SRE, it's always about finding ways how to balance this together, how to find a right contract, how both things work together. And then you have a leader that understands those sides, then I think you're going to be good.
Okay. And how, like, as you coming from a CTO perspective to the CPTO, how did you handle product then? Did you get into like things like product discovery yourself? Did you just like lead your way through, or how do you see that? Like, how deep do you have to be in product if you are a CPTO from a CTO's perspective?
Well, I am kind of the person that I wouldn't just tell people what to do. I would like to invest and figure out the structure. So I'm kind of not needed into day-to-day decisions. It was a learning curve for sure. I had a head of product. At that point, when I joined, the head of product was in San Francisco. So I'm based in Berlin. 9 hours of difference doesn't really help. But at the same time, 60% of our customers are in US. So we have to be global, and we have to kind of stay global. We also had to change the ways how we build product. While we are staying agile, there's always like a room for improvement in a way of how you do discovery, exactly what you mentioned. So ultimately, when the head of product that we had decided to move on, I started drafting a job description, a scorecard of a different profile. And I managed to get that new VP product on board with a completely different mindset in a way how we build product, and that drove the transformation further. It took about 6-7 months to set it in stone. As you know, like transformation, it's always painful. It's always process. And I think we're on the way of solving that. But it was a pretty hard job to do. And there was a lot of hands-on and a lot of even writing requirements and aligning and with customers, with stakeholders internally, how to do those things, a lot of kind of evangelism. And I continue to do so. It's just I'm more in the supporting role and making sure that my leaders get kind of the stage to drive those changes, and I'm here to help.
Okay. Maybe we talk a bit about SmartRecruiters and recruiting in general. So I guess you have like quite good insights as you see a lot of data flowing through your system. But first of all, I want to understand, like, if I look at such a solution, like I would compare it, like it's a CRM for recruiting, right? Is that correct?
Well, we also have a CRM. It's much more than that. So I didn't quite correct you before of thinking about like as an ATS. Yes, we're an ATS, but we are more than that. So we think about it as all of the tools that you need to manage your recruitment end to end. And it starts with kind of any strategy that you might have to attract talent, right? So employer branding, how does your career page look like? How do you engage with candidates? And again, like thinking about different type of candidates as well. It starts also kind of building the strategy. And then there's also a CRM with your candidates. If you think about candidates that you're after, like engineers, and we're at the CTO podcast, so talking about developers and attracting top talent, CRM there is more important because you kind of go after people more and try to nurture them and figure out if this didn't work out for this particular job, I'd like to hire that person because that person was really, really good. So there is also CRM component. But then there's also kind of the selection and hiring process, which right now it's a part of the ATS that goes then further into offer management, digital signature, integration with a broader system, and then up to onboarding and how to make the person successful at their first 30, 90 days. So it's a pretty big system.
Okay, so really like an end-to-end recruiting solution, essentially.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I can't really compare it to an Excel spreadsheet or something. I understand that and respect that. It would also be maybe a bit funny if something that compares to an Excel spreadsheet would be worth 1 billion. But I want to understand, like, what is the hard thing about SmartRecruiters, like product-wise, tech-wise? What makes it like a hard thing to do to build such a platform?
So we play in kind of an enterprise market, and we serve about like 4,000 enterprise customers worldwide, and those are really large, right? So like our bigger customers are companies like Bosch or LinkedIn that recently went live, Skechers, Rituals. So there's a pretty large portfolio, and if you think about the difficulty of rolling out a system like that to bigger companies, you need to stay secure, compliant. You need to be platform. You need to be a set of APIs in the marketplace on how to actually integrate into a life cycle of the company of that scale, but then also provide with any possible coverage around privacy and scale. So if we look at the kind of the markets right now where we play, there are not a lot of companies that have this somewhat opinionated approach, kind of UX approach, the consumer feel of that will delight kind of hiring teams and hiring managers and those who actually run the interview, and also have that enterprise scale. So what we try to combine here is how do we bring those two together? Having a solid architecture, ability to serve large clients, APIs, and throttling limits that support that. Then also kind of rounded up security, and on another side, this kind of consumer feel in terms of how you use the product and configurability that will delight actual end users and not those who pay for the system. And we're kind of uniquely positioned there because there are not a lot of companies in our space that do that.
Okay. And how did your product and hiring change in the last year or in the last 2 years? I guess a lot. I mean, with the pandemic around, but how precisely?
You mean like the...
Yeah, what changed? I mean, did your product change due to COVID? Because like, I don't know, remote interviews were kind of really getting more and more important. And the market, yeah. How did the market evolve from your perspective, being like, or more focusing on maybe remote work, salaries exploding partly? I know that's a very broad question, so maybe we start with the product.
I think like we always try to work it out with our customers, and we do see the trends of what's going on. And on one side, then the explosion on the market and a lot of different players of getting investment and growth that leads towards mass hiring events. So one of the data points that we've seen that amount of posted jobs months over months been growing 70% on our platform on average. So per company. So as you can imagine, 70% for every user or for every customer that we have, they've been posting 70% more jobs per month. So it's almost double. So that is crazy. So we started seeing like a huge amount of applicants and a huge amount of jobs. So obviously thinking about the problems to solve here, if tomorrow you post a job and it gets 1,000 applicants, what are you going to do with them? You cannot manually screen 1,000 applications. So the needs for technology became quite evident that we need to invest in AI and some sort of discovery process of what you have in your pipeline. What are the kind of best traits here? And then that's kind of just on the surface of recruiter productivity. So also invested in acquiring a company also here in Berlin, JobPal. So now it's a SmartPal and it's part of the solution for us. So it allows for mass hiring and kind of engaging candidates via chat. So you don't have to have a lengthy interviewing process or lengthy applying process, but you can just put your phone number and your details, and it will help you to serve up the jobs that might be a fit for you. So that was another investment that we made. And it's a lot of components around collaboration. Like you're right, like the remote hiring changed, and also remote onboarding is also one of those things that was also top of mind for us. Like, how do we go to completely remote? And maybe we were kind of privileged SmartRecruiters because we're already a distributed company. We were remote to each other, but it was still a learning curve on how you like completely stay at home and work with kids, and how you be as flexible as possible, and how to do video interviews, and do you do assessments or don't you do assessments? So there's like a need of constantly integrating with other providers and make sure the integration is seamless. So that's kind of where was our core focus on the products been last year, and we continue to evolve that, right? So there's also parts of reporting and visibility. Since you're not with your colleagues in the same office day to day, you can just walk to the desk and ask things. So the accessibility for data becomes more important as well. So people can pull the report as they want to, whenever they want to. So those are kind of like key drivers that we had.
And what about third-party integrations on your platform? So I guess also tools like, I don't know, Codility, like coding tests and others are integrated with you, or you maybe have your own solution. Did that become more important, or is that very important for you yourself? I mean, you also hire a lot of tech people. Do you do such tests, or how is your overall process? How did your process change also due to COVID?
We did several iterations on our process. So let me address the first question. We are an open platform. We have a marketplace. We work with our partners, and we encourage them to integrate with us. We recently relaunched our developer portal, so we keep our public API up to date, and keep engaging with partners and integrate with them directly. And we even consider this as our selling point. So if you get SmartRecruiters, you don't just get us. You also get a set of partners on marketplace that you can integrate with one click. So that's the part of the first question. To the second part, in terms of how our process evolved, we did multiple tests, and we started like as everybody. We had a coding task, and then we would review that, and we made sure that we'll come back to candidates and explain what we saw and what would be the feedback. So it was quite lengthy, and I think it took us about 5 weeks of time to hire for engineers. Now with our recent fundraise, I have a goal of hiring about 200 engineers in the next 18 months. That obviously cannot scale anymore. So what we recently did, we actually killed coding task this week. And we're moving towards more streamlined way of defining a scorecard for every job within the engineering to kind of identify leveling of what we would expect for every level. What are the salary bands for every level? What are the interviewers should be focusing on every particular screen? And we replaced a kind of coding task with pair programming, as we think that it was kind of a duplicated effort also for candidates of investing into coding task. And we kind of aim to shorten our time to hire to 2.5 weeks. That's what my team is rallying around right now.
And are you hiring in Berlin, or are you like hiring everywhere?
We're hiring in Berlin and in Krakow. So kind of my engineering team is spread between Berlin and Krakow. So we also remote friendly. So when we decided not to go completely back to the office, even after the major reopening. So we anticipated people are going to be excited to meet each other face to face, and we're totally fine with that. But we decided to kind of stay flexible and give people a choice. However, we want to hire around the same time zone to keep people productive so they can actually communicate with each other. And if it needs to be, go to either local office or meet in one of our hubs. Yeah.
I think some people also changed their lives due to COVID and, I don't know, bought a house somewhere in the green nature outside of the city. And kind of, I think there's something like FONO, like fear of normal for some people, that they have to go back to the office and can't work from home anymore. Do you see that as well, or?
I think right now, at least what I'm hearing from the team, they actually like to be at home, but it's been way too long. And for some of our people, it's also been not only working from home, but working with kids from home. So it's not just like handling what are you dialing into and the constant video chats and kind of figuring out how your day's going to look like, but also educating kids because school is closed or daycare is not working. So we don't see much of like, I bought a house, I'm afraid to go back. And maybe it's just because we were quite proactive and said, you know what, you don't have to if you don't want to, but be ready to at least show up at the office, I don't know, maybe once a week or once in 2 weeks. So stay in the same country, kind of, right? So we don't see a lot of anxiety of people of going back. Actually, a lot of excitement and questions like, when can we go back to the office, see people, collaborate, and kind of have any sort of workshops. I think there's just this need of seeing normality, and it's becoming quite surreal. Like we had another workshop in the office, and for me, it felt like I had a business trip. Like I met to see people in real life, and it felt like I flew somewhere, although I just walked to the office. So I guess there are a lot of challenges with coming back to normality. I don't know, fear or excitement, but there's definitely something.
This episode is proudly presented by Dell Technologies. They are a team of experts that helps you solving all your IT-related challenges and IT needs in your daily business and consult you in choosing the right end-to-end IT solutions or products. They offer IT technology solutions for companies of any size, tailored to their needs, and have a huge product portfolio with IT solutions and know-how. They can help CTOs through providing end-to-end IT solutions, be it laptops, PCs, workstations, or server, storage, cloud, and IoT solutions or financing. If you want to know more, please check the show notes to get a link. In your LinkedIn profile, the header states, "Ask me about the diversity hiring blueprint." I don't want to ask you about that blueprint now, but maybe later. I wanted to step back to recruiting once more and ask you for your top 3 hiring tips for tech people. I know that it's hard, but I guess like I once realized that how important it is to, for example, have someone who's really leading the process in early stage companies and things like that. So always be on time or something like that. Just 3 tips that you think are good to know.
Oh, I don't know if it's real. I'll try to share some, I don't know, maybe my thoughts on it. I think right now everybody wants to compete for talent. Everybody's hiring, or at least in my network, everybody's hiring, and it's top of mind, right? So, and if you think about it, the weeks that you don't get the right talent on board is costing you money, basically, as a business. So you need to take it seriously. You need to understand what you're searching for. You need to take it as a business priority, and you need to come to the candidates on time with the right feedback. And that was part of the reasons why we wanted to shorten our recruitment cycle, because people who are searching for a job and top talent, they'll get multiple offers tomorrow. And if you're not the first, then you might lose on the best talent. So that's kind of one of the maybe learnings for me, or top tips, like really take care of this time to hire and how long do you take to respond, and take it seriously. Another one is part of the recruitment as well is do provide feedback to people. If you think about another data point, right? It takes about 200 applications for an average person to get one invite to the interview. So if you think about what's on the other side of people who are applying, especially if they're not unicorns and being directly recruited by recruiters, but they actually apply to your jobs, they only get maybe one answer, and about 50% don't even get an answer. So even rejection email, a thoughtful rejection email, it removes this kind of black hole of not knowing what's going on, where you stand. So please respond to your candidates as well. Like even if it's a no, or someone didn't pass a task, or especially if someone invested and made a coding task for you, just think about someone probably spends 3 to 8 hours of writing that. They do deserve an answer, if something to improve or what to do next. So that's probably tip number 2. We could talk about diversity in terms of tip number 3 and kind of maybe improve your sourcing, right? So from this perspective, I guess that's more of an ask of taking it this seriously. And as me being a woman in tech, I think I would appreciate that if at the early stage, in a sense of when you apply and how you're being treated when you're beginning your career. So my kind of ask for leadership would be to take diversity programs seriously and invest in sourcing, and also kind of defining a scorecard of what you're looking for to fight the bias. That's probably number 3.
And like from my perspective, it's always hard, like especially if you aim for 50-50 in engineering, to get the right talent on board, like the right amount of female talent, for example. Do you see that differently, or is it just that you first have to go through that mind change to take it seriously and then try to do as best as you can, or how do you see that?
Diversity, it's a broader issue. It's not just gender, right? It's religion. It's creating an environment for underrepresented people to feel safe, to be able to join that. So there's definitely an element of creating a culture of inclusivity, and so people are comfortable talking about their issues and bringing this up safely without kind of being afraid of losing their job. So that part definitely needs to happen. It's a longer change. And I think for us as leaders, that's kind of our responsibility to create this environment and make sure that it's fostered, and certain things are not okay. And in order to create that environment, you kind of need a commitment from leadership team of saying, no, it's not okay. And it kind of starts with the CEO, but not only CEO, because it's also not just one person job. You can have amazing processes, you can have amazing statements, but if your teams and your managers do not believe in that and don't follow, that it's also not going to work. Now, in terms of popular or unpopular opinion, should there be a goal for diversity? I believe there should be. Now, it needs to be achievable, right? So from the perspective of what can we do in this next 6 months to make it better? And I think just setting 50% needs to be female, it's probably not right. And all of the companies are different and they have different challenges. That's part of the reason why we have this diversity hiring blueprint and toolkit, in a sense of assessing where you are, what challenges do you have, and then putting measures in place how to even understand what are you dealing with. Like, is it the amount of candidates that you're not getting in? Is it your selection process that is biased? Or is it your culture that you cannot actually retain this kind of talent? And all of them come with the different challenges and different goals in mind. And based on what you learn, you can build kind of your project plan or to-do list for the next certain amount of time. But you always need to stay on top of that, because it's not just a one-off thing that, you tick it off and you forgot it and you're done. It's kind of a journey to take. And then you keep getting better, hopefully, and progressing on your diversity journey. Yeah,
it's in a way, it's often a mind shift that has to start at leadership level, right? Just one very funny example, because it's it's my own. I remember me, like, let's say 10 years ago, not having a kid at home. I was always a bit skeptic and pissed when someone said, okay, I have to go to the doctor with my daughter or something. And I just couldn't understand it, right? And sometimes you have to go through this yourself to like then understand it and change that. It's like I did when I had a kid. I like for the first time really understood what it means and how serious it is. And that this doesn't mean that someone is working less. Like a bit of an awkward example, but
it's actually amazing, and thank you for sharing that. I don't think there are a lot of people that will be confident enough about themselves of sharing, hey, I actually learned something, and it's absolutely fine not knowing the challenges of others. But I think we should all kind of strive towards understanding what are the challenges on another side and kind of keep the open mind of learning. And I know my story, I know what I'm dealing with, but like there's so many examples that I do not know and they have different challenges. So I guess like if you stay open to that kind of changing of your mindset, of an understanding of others, in my view, that's kind of what we all should strive to do.
So how much discrimination did you get throughout your career?
Oh, I wouldn't dwell on that. I think every of those things kind of teach you a little bit, and I'm kind of privileged enough right now to say, hey, I can pick my employer. And I like when I go and interview with any particular company, I really interview them too. There was, I think, at the beginning of my career, I did a coding task, and the interviewer didn't believe that I did it, and he thought that it was my boyfriend. And he was really adamant about it. So yeah, there was at the beginning. But again, there are a lot of bad apples. The same with interviewing for leadership roles. I think we have a lot to learn. And as I said, I'm privileged enough right now to be able to interview the other side as well. And I just avoid those kind of employers myself. But there are other women or people of color that don't get to choose. So. And they need a job, and they just have to live with it.
I think the world also changed a bit, like looking at diversity and how important it became in so many companies, and especially looking at women in tech. I think that was kind of a helpful topic for some companies as well, and they just jumped on it. But I think, like, bottom line, it's a good thing that they did, right? Like. Whoever decides, even like at the beginning, maybe for, I don't know, PR reasons, but later on they realize, okay, this is serious, this makes sense. Like whoever jumps on it will change the world a little bit, right?
Yeah, I think we started talking about it. That's definitely a step forward. I think this kind of getting more and more international employers, mixing cultures, that makes it also evident. So I think we improved. There's also a long way to go. Also within this diversity hiring blueprint, we surveyed a lot of people from underrepresented communities, and whooping 50% of people from underrepresented communities still feel that them coming from a minority limits their chances to get a career. And that's bad. So it's not just women in leadership or women in tech. It's kind of overall, it's a pretty bad, it's a humanity issue from this perspective. And like from my personal experience being in Germany and working for an American company, I think in US, they are a little bit ahead in terms of talking about those issues and in a very different level, where in Germany, we're a little bit slower on recognizing that. But it is what it is. So I think we need to continue talking about it, and hopefully the world will change.
I think it does, yeah. It just needs, like, every once in a while, it needs a little push. Like, I mean, I also, like, again, example from myself, I didn't have any female guests for a while in the podcast. And that was also because I didn't put too much energy in it, or enough energy maybe, to really find someone. And it is obviously not 50-50 in the CTO world. And you have to kick yourself in the butt every once in a while and arrange something. But that has to be done, right? I don't want to I don't know, congratulate myself or anything. I would rather want to blame myself for not doing it for such a long time. Maybe one thing that I'm missing for now in your blueprint is how do I, as a leader, get rid of biases in hiring? Is there any tip you can give me how I can ignore my biases, or maybe even realize that I have a bias in a certain moment?
So I think so there are two questions there, right? So first, it's probably you cannot get rid of bias. That's just a myth. What you can do, you can fight it. You can acknowledge that you have one, and every time you make a decision, you just pause and don't let your biases drive your decisions. And that's beyond hiring. It's kind of in any kind of decision making. There are a whole bunch of tools that you can use, and that's actually was a very good learning for me from Google, because they introduced this bias busting program that you can assess yourself of how you think about certain things, be it race, gender, or whatever else, on onboarding. And then it's a kind of a teaser for you to kind of understand how you actually tick and how you make your own decisions. And then it's being kind of baked into hiring, training, and stuff like that. So in order to understand what biases you have and how you deal with them, I would recommend to do any sort of bias busting training, just to understand yourself better, of what shaped you. And we all grew up with it. It's perfectly fine. Your surroundings shape you. If you're not introduced to a lot of queer people, you don't know. And if you don't know, you tend to discriminate, or like levitate towards something that you actually know. Now, in recruiting, the tip there, it's actually for every job to create a scorecard. So you have a job, you think about what would a successful candidate look like, what kind of business outcomes you would expect from this candidate, and you write it down, right? So what are you actually evaluating for? And then for every interview, you fill out the scorecard. So basically, you think about upfront of what you're looking for in the candidate, and then put your feedback towards the scorecard and not what you think personally about that candidate. And if you have that done for the whole panel with cards down, right? So like I'm submitting feedback and you submitting feedback, and you do not know what I put in there. You just put yourself, and you're not being led by others. Those are two things that you can do within recruiting really, really fast within the tools that we offer, or any other software does.
Okay, that's a good tip, actually, that scorecard. Would you also recommend, like every once in a while in startups, you have that opportunistic hiring? Would you recommend to interview more than 3 candidates per job, or something you think is a good number, or?
Well, sometimes if you really know the person and you know your scorecard, and you got this amazing candidate that happened to apply first, and the whole team agreed that this is the best candidate for the job, then why not, right? If the whole team really agrees. And if you don't get another applicants, why would you wait? So I think the answer here, it depends. But you do need to make sure that your interview panel is diverse, in the sense of it's not just those people who know that person that worked with someone, right? But also can provide with unbiased feedback. Is it actually the right hire? And as long as you do that, I think it's absolutely fine.
Okay. And I think it also depends if on the question, if the person applied for the job, or if you wanted him to or her to apply, right? So if you actively sourced, or if you got like an invitation, or if you got like an application from the outside, right?
Well, I guess the panel would depend, right? If I'm actively after someone that I really want to hire, then it's not kind of the first applicant that you have. So, and if that person happened to pass all of the interviews and agree and accept your offer, then again, why not? But if it's someone that you know personally because you work together, there is a certain bias that you bring into hiring process. So then you need a second opinion, and ultimately should probably remove yourself from evaluating directly.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot. So we slowly have to come to the end, and I still see that you, like, in a way, you seem to be still very technical at certain points, right? And I like to ask people for a tool that they annoy their friends with. So like a productivity tool, maybe also a process, not purely like a technical tool, but maybe it's a software you're annoying everyone with every once in a while. Does that exist? Do you have something you recommend everyone, be it an engineer or not? Use this and your life gets better straight away. Do you have something like that?
I wouldn't know. I think the set of technology that we started using for kind of remote collaboration expanded dramatically. And again, maybe because I'm in a mixed role of product and technology, I tend to gravitate towards product analytics and ability to access data and ability to report on data. So one of the my favorite things to recommend that is free, it's Metabase. Like if you don't have data warehouse and you don't have ability to visualize data, or you want to implement something within your product, that would be my tool to go first. And if you exhaust all of those capacity of that tool, yeah, by all means, you can go and explore other things like Tableau and something more expensive. So that is probably what comes to mind with what you asked me for. It's not really like a nerdy thing or what I do and your life gets better, but it's a bit.
Yeah, I think it's really a hack. Like I use Metabase as well and love it. Because it's so simple, it plugs straight away into your production database. And if you combine it with Stitch data or something like that, you get all the data into one place and build like a data warehouse without any effort. That would have costed you like $500,000 a few years ago. So I think it's valid.
Oh, yeah, cool.
It's a very valid answer. And when it comes to hiring, any tools you can recommend? I guess obviously your tool. So I skipped that question.
Well, look, you don't actually need to pay for the tool, right? So SmartRecruiters has a free offering, which we don't really advertise, I think, often enough. But basically, you can get SmartRecruiters for free if you have like 10 jobs at any given time. So that would be one tip. But again, it's kind of a shameless plug. We use Codility, pretty happy with this. And there's some other, well, it's not for recruiting, it's mostly for actually maintaining code and security vulnerabilities and some other.
And then question to the same direction, also to the tool direction potentially. You mentioned product analytics. What are your thoughts on measuring effectiveness of engineering organizations, like tools that do, for example, Git analytics? Do you believe in that?
I think it's a little bit double-sided, right? So amount of code you produce doesn't necessarily translate into the outcomes you produce. So I'm kind of more of a true believer of joint effort of product engineering and design and building the proper triad and thinking about the OKRs that they drive and the outcomes that they achieve and measure it by that. We tried kind of thinking about any sort of productivity in terms of code commits and code quality. We do that, but I just don't think it's actual productivity. It's certain KPIs to make sure that engineers do their job and do the quality job, and the certain teams does the amount of production commits, and it actually goes to production and there are no more rollbacks. Those are KPIs for quality, but not necessarily for output of the R&D organization. So for me, for the output of R&D organization, it would be actual usage by customers and value by customers, however you can define that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is maybe something where you have to derive to OKRs and so on. Just thinking of like a simple example, I don't know if you saw that Reddit post a few months ago from an engineer who said, yeah, I earn 1.5 million per year because I have 5 jobs. And I think that is something where, a lot of organizations don't have visibility on, right? And then it might make sense to have that as one aspect in your in your whole KPI chain, I would say, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of remarkable of holding 5 jobs and all 5 of them are being happy with the results. Because I think it's pretty evident when one engineer starts having a side gig and there's a productivity dip on a certain extent. Now, again, if you expect that and you're fine with that, by all means, but generally, there is kind of an average expectation of what, I don't know, a senior engineer would do and how deep he or she will collaborate with others and will be able to produce. So yeah, but quite remarkable, 5 jobs.
Yeah, I mean, really depends on the company, how deeply they drag you in as a remote engineer, right?
Yeah.
Really depends on them. So then I come to the closing question. So I saw that you worked for an agency, a German agency called Mayflower back in 2009, I think. And I know the CTO, Johann Peter Hartmann. And he gave me they are focusing on PHP. So he gave me like a patched version of PHP that they somehow internally developed back then. And it has actually a hidden secret function called Time Machine. Which allows you to just pass in 1 year and you then travel back. And I do that and want to jump to the year 2009 when you worked there. And you worked there as a software engineer and you can now observe yourself for a while, or we can observe yourself for a while. And you now have the chance to whisper something into your young self's ear. What would be your secret whisper?
Well, the Mayflower gig for me was something that, like, when I moved to Germany, I couldn't speak German. I went to work full-time. I went to study German full-time, and that was my part-time engineering gig of not being a manager, so coming back to IC. I worked pretty closely with CTO, had a couple of interesting interactions around PHP unit and how to deal with all of those things. I don't consider myself being young in the beginning of the career when I worked for them. So I don't know. I don't think it would be the advice for myself in 2009, but rather maybe myself in 2005. And the advice would be, don't be afraid and actually speak up and do it. Because I think the imposter syndrome, especially for women, is thriving and well. So you usually find yourselves like, oh, I'm not an expert. I do not know that. And you try to hold back where, like, for example, in Mayflower, there were engineers that had less experience than me, and they would go into the conferences and talk about things that they just picked up. And I had at that time 3 years of experience, and I still didn't consider myself as an expert. So yeah, the advice would be like that. Just believe in yourself. You're actually good enough. Just go ahead and do it. Or go and say it. It's fine.
Okay. So that was a good answer. Yeah, sorry for the bad example. I picked, but I somehow like the time machine function thing. So it was really great talking to you. And I hope that we have the chance again. And hopefully we can also meet again every once in a while when the world is a bit calmer again. I hope that it soon, the COVID situation changes and evolves. And hope to see you soon again.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.